as a reminder of our community agreements, don't be afraid to sit in your discomfort, take risks even when you're unsure, stay engaged when you're uncomfortable, listen for understanding, speak your truth, no fixing, be prepared. Your questions may not be answered. Expect and accept non-closure. Don't dominate or share your mic. Be self-motivated to search for your own truth. Next slide, please. And then just a little bit of housekeeping. As you saw, this meeting will be recorded and posted to the YouTube channel. If you need to step away, please do so. And then here's some tips for using Zoom. Just let us know if you have any trouble. Closed captioning is enabled. Try to keep your video on as much as possible. If you have questions, please use the hand raising tool and feel welcome to share your comments in the chat box. And then during the presentation, you can widen your video gallery if you like to see others while viewing the slides. That reminds me, I should turn my video on. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Candace Goodrich with the Rainier Ave bus lane only project for a couple of slides and a couple of updates. So before Candace jumps in, I think what I like to do in these meetings going forward is just give you all an update on projects that are happening in the South. So these aren't just happening in a vacuum. We're very coordinated with the other projects, and sometimes people have questions about these. So I just want to, we're going to bring people in from SDOT to talk about these projects. So I'm going to turn it over to Candace.
Yeah, thanks, Adonis. So good morning, everybody. My name is Candace Goodrich, and I'm the outreach lead for the Rainier Ave Bus Only Lanes project. I think I saw James Lee here in the audience too. James is the PM for this project, so he's here to just listen in. So like Adonis said, I'll just give a little background and overview on this project so you know what's going on and really know who I am as the outreach lead for this work and how to get in touch with me and stay engaged on this project if you have questions. So I'll try to be brief and not take up too much of your time here today. So we are expanding the bus only lanes on Rainier Ave to improve transit reliability and create more consistent transit travel times on one of Seattle's busiest transit corridors. As I'm sure you all know, the Route 7 bus uses Rainier Ave, and the Route 7 has some of the highest ridership of all buses in King County, which was true before and throughout the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the Route 7 was the 4th busiest route in King County, and currently it's the 2nd busiest route. So because of that high ridership, we know that the Route 7 is really a lifeline for the community, that many people rely on it, like truly rely on it to get where they're going each day, which was also true during the pandemic. So through adding those bus only lanes now, we're able to help make those transit trips more reliable and more consistent. This project builds on outreach that SDOT and King County Metro did in recent years around transportation needs and priorities as a part of the Rapid Ride R project. Through that outreach, we heard many things. One, that people really want reliable transit to reach destinations and essential services on Rainier Ave. We heard support and a desire for transit trips that take less time and connect people to other transit. We heard support for a bus only lane and that there's a need for improved safety and particularly for people walking and biking to bus stops. So this project is being built in 2 phases. The first phase, which was installed in early July, extended the northbound bus only lanes from South Alaska Street to South Walden Street, and the southbound bus only lanes from South Oregon Street to South Edmond Street. Like I said, that work was done in early July, and we're about to start the second phase of this project, which will evaluate extending the northbound bus lanes further to North Massachusetts Street, and would also include some signal upgrades to help keep transit and other traffic moving efficiently. We're in early design for that work, and we expect to begin our outreach soon. That outreach and design will continue through this year and through next year as well. This project is funded by the Seattle Transit Measure, which was passed by Seattle voters in 2020. That measure provides a funding source for more frequent, reliable, and accessible bus service throughout Seattle. So while this project really focuses on options to further improve transit reliability and more consistent transit times, we know that Rainier Ave really serves all types of travelers, and it's a really important corridor. So our outreach in phase 2 will include listening to what else the people who use and rely on Rainier need, in addition to the surrounding communities. And that feedback will help inform SDOT and other city leaders on what to consider next for future phases of work in this area. Next slide, please. So what's coming up, like I said, the first phase was just installed in early July, and it typically takes people a couple of months to adjust to new road configuration changes. So we started monitoring traffic on Rainier and other nearby streets prior to installing those first phase of bus only lanes. And we're going to continue monitoring traffic and collecting that data through the next month. Then based on what we learn from that data, we may make future adjustments or pursue other opportunities for other investments to help manage and calm traffic. Like I said, we begin to hope our outreach on phase 2 soon, and we'll share more information about phase 2 and opportunities to hear feedback from folks on our project webpage and our project email list. So if folks haven't signed up for email updates, I encourage you to do so. You can sign up on our webpage, which is listed here on the slide, and you can also scan that QR code. Here too on the slide is just more information on how you can get a hold of us. You can email us or call us, and someone on our outreach team will get back to you. And you can also please share this information with the other folks in your groups, the people that you're here to help represent, just so that, again, people know where they can find out more information about this project, know how to get in touch with us, and know how to stay engaged. And if there's time, I'm happy to take a couple of questions, but otherwise, I hope this was helpful, and hope to hear from y'all.
So we can open it up to a couple of questions. I think there was a question in the chat. Go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free.
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure that I've noticed that there's traffic counters on Lake Washington Boulevard, and when you have changes such as this on Rainier, there's a lot of suspect within the neighborhood that it pushes more traffic onto the boulevard. But I think that we really need long-term data to support or deny that supposition on the part of people that live here. So I hope that the counters will remain for some time regarding also the closures or openings, whatever you want to call it, along the boulevard. Sometimes those things are only out for a month or so, and I hope they'll be longer. So if you could let me know, it'd be good.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Terry.
Any other questions for Candace while she's here? Well,
sorry, I just thought of a question. How are these bus only lanes going to be enforced, and how, if they are going to be enforced, how do we ensure that it is done in such a way that doesn't harm the communities of color here in South Seattle?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So we do there are limits on where and how we can use traffic enforcement cameras in the city. And so currently we have a pilot program going on right now. I think there's 8 different locations in kind of the downtown area, with some new traffic enforcement cameras that are designed to take pictures of people driving in transit lanes and blocking intersections. So those are the only cameras that we have right now and that we're able to use for camera enforcement on transit lanes. And like I said, that's just a pilot program that I think is running for like another couple of years. And based on, you know, how that pilot program pans out and kind of further direction from the legislature, we may or may not be able to do additional camera enforcement on transit lanes. But like you said, you know, that equitable component of camera enforcement is really important, which is why there are those limitations on how we can use it. So right now we don't have any camera enforcement on this project. There are those cameras downtown, like I said, and there might be opportunities for other types of enforcement in the future. James, I don't know if you're here and you have anything else to add for that topic.
Not on the enforcement topic, but regarding the traffic counter question, yes, we are planning to keep those going on through end of fall. And then I think depending on how what the volumes look like, we might continue extending them further.
So Candace, thank you. I do have a question about the lanes. You know, if I noticed that there is signs that said right turn and also bicycles allowed. Can you help us understand the difference between a bike lane and bicycles being allowed to use this? And what kind of guidance or support are you providing for people who commute or travel by bicycle on how to best use these lanes?
Yeah, thanks, Joey. So people biking are allowed to bike wherever is most safe and comfortable for them. And so usually that is the curbside lane, which is, in this case, is where we have the bus only lanes. And that is also in the context of when there's not a dedicated bicycle only lane, of course. And so we have those signs out to just kind of help clarify for people biking that they are allowed to be in lanes that are marked as bus only, if that's the safest place for them to travel. So the signs help with that awareness. We've been trying to help share that message too in our outreach and on our materials, to help folks know that is allowed.
Also, Ty had her hand up as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I know that, you know, budgets are involved with these types of things, but in terms of traffic counters, as it relates to Rainier Avenue South bus lanes, which means one lane for other motor vehicles, how that not only affects Lake Washington Boulevard, but then when LWB closes to motor vehicles, what does that do to other thoroughfares in South Seattle? So what does that do? I'm looking at a map right now to 30th Avenue South. What does that do to 50th Avenue South? What does that do to Martin Luther King? Does that move cars there? So if we can take a little bit broader view, because all of that affects South Seattle. I'm done, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Yeah, we are collecting volumes on several different arterials. And I think looking at MLK, Lake Washington Boulevard, Rainier, Genesee, and maybe a few others. Depending on if those volumes start deviating, then we'll look at collecting more streets out there. But for now, I think we're just kind of collecting data, waiting to see what happens, and continue to evaluate further.
I had a quick question on the enforcement. So thanks, folks, for bringing that up. In many ways, the camera enforcement doesn't necessarily or inherently suggest it's more equitable. It just means that you don't have to pay a police officer to do that. And you have communities that are then unaware, or there's lights over here in Beacon that are hidden behind trees or poles, and many of our communities are then taking a picture of, and then you get a $300 ticket for very inconspicuous signing and rules, and it changes depending on the time of the day. And so I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for there to be warnings, if we're going to use camera, that the first one be a warning, at least saying, hey, you were in this, especially since it's a new thing. Having grown up in the Mission, right, the red bus lanes serve to be beneficial in expediting travel time. It was also used as a tool of making sure certain communities didn't get on those roads to prevent them from going from one place to the next. And those were typically Black and brown communities, which brings up another point, not necessarily related to this, but it was again used, for example, in the Mission District in San Francisco, where the red bus lane was, or bus only lane was used as a tool of preventing what we would call cruising, which is a cultural work of our communities, of building community, of going out together. And when we talk about the LWS, I mean, there's a history of lowriders, a history of communities that go to Seward Park and have these events. And I interestingly saw a sign, and I hadn't seen it before, that it says no cruising, which means then it's unlawful, which is super counterintuitive to everything we're talking about, because cruising, at least any of the cruising I've been a part of, you are not going faster than 25 miles an hour. But yet we're now prohibiting it. And I don't mean to take us on a complete tangent, but I really would like us to contemplate, like, what is the consequential effects of what we're doing here. And if we're going to reprimand folks for it, then there should be an opportunity to learn through it. And also there should be no attempt to try to stop or prevent cruising, because communities who, quote unquote, live there, though I would argue those going through it also live there, decide they don't like this type of behavior.
Yeah, thanks, Edwin. I can answer your question or speak to the warning letter piece. So those new cameras that I mentioned that take photos of people driving in transit lanes or blocking intersections, you do get a warning letter first on that one. Really, our goal is to not issue tickets, but just have people understand the laws and the traffic rules, right? And to not drive in transit lanes and to not block intersections. So we did do, before those were installed earlier this year, we did a bit of an outreach campaign that was in multiple languages, focused kind of in the CID and downtown where those cameras were installed, to let people know well in advance of it was coming, that there would be, people are going to get warning letters first, and really just to explain the rules about how you're not supposed to drive in transit lanes and block intersections. And so those cameras, I do know, have warning letters that a person would get on their first infraction. And then the second one, if they do it again, it comes with a ticket. And I don't know about the cruising issue that you brought up, but that's really great feedback. And I don't know if anyone else on the SDOT team has anything to say about that side.
I remember when those signs went up when we were kids in high school. So those signs have been up for 20 years or more here, and Alki too, which is interesting. But one thing I do, Edwin, I appreciate the point, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on Lake Washington Boulevard, but what I'm hearing you say is there is a cultural element to that. There's a neighborhood element to that. There's an element of Lake Washington, because I remember going down there as a kid, and Ty was probably around in the same circles, but there was, all the nice cars would go down there. People put the rims on the cars and stuff, and they all go down there. So that is just good feedback for this project to be considered going forward. And then on the note about the anti-cruising, I think I will bring that up to our SDOT leadership, who can elevate that to the folks who can make the change. Because I don't know if there's a legal or some kind of council action that needs to happen to get that removed, but we will elevate that issue because looking at it now, it smacks of something. So
it'd be like having a sign that said no cycling.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Candace and James Lee from the Rainier Ave Bus Only Lane project. I think James Lee will be joining us at one of our next meetings to talk about the Vision Zero Phase 3 work down here in Rainier Beach. Down here in Rainier Beach area. So he'll come and talk about some of the work that he's doing and give folks an opportunity to ask questions. But really this is just another touch point for you all in the task force to talk to SDOT, go back to your people, let them know what SDOT is doing, give them points of contact so that if they have questions about the bus lanes on Rainier Ave, you know who you can go to. You can go to Candace, go to James Lee, or you can come through me and I can connect you with them. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Great. And appreciate folks who brought this up at the last meeting as well as something to dig into deeper. And so again, if those things come up, we can do our best to try to find the folks within SDOT or other government departments who can answer the questions that you all have. So as you all probably saw from the email that was sent out about this meeting, that we're going to really be deep into the kind of setting up our foundation around equity, our outreach strategy, and how we're going to go about making decisions amongst this task force. And the next few slides that we're going to be digging into are really going to be looking at the Seattle, let me put it up for you all, but the City of Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative. One of the reasons why we're focusing so specifically on the City of Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative is that often when groups like this come together, we could all have many different definitions of what equity means or different types of goals that everyone is coming with. And so what we wanted to do is to be able to use a tool that already exists within the City of Seattle and that is used to kind of help when it comes to making decisions and processes such as these, such as the Lake Washington Boulevard Task Force, that's really going to have a big impact on what this Lake Washington Boulevard looks like and the way that community is able to provide input and help influence and shape this. And so today, as a part of our process in creating our own tools and our own foundation for how we're moving forward, we want to be able to look at some of the tools that already exist within the City of Seattle that we're going to be able to apply today. So the City of Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative is the city's commitment to eliminate racial disparities and achieve racial equity in Seattle. RSJI grew out of seeds planted by anti-racist trainings from the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. We honor that legacy today by adopting the PSAB principles as our own. And for reference, those principles that the RSJI department is talking about are analyzing power, developing leadership, addressing gatekeeping, identifying and analyzing manifestations of racism, learning from history, maintaining accountability, networking, sharing culture, undoing internalized racial oppression, and undoing racism. And so the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond is very much an organization I've worked with and continue to work with, and I'm a part of the network. So I'm happy to see that the City of Seattle is using this framework and happy to support you all on how we're able to put it into practice with this Lake Washington Boulevard Task Force. So a little bit about RSJI is that it's the city's long-term commitment to undo institutional racism. The racial justice work is carried out by a citywide infrastructure, city workers, community members that live in every branch of the city government. This infrastructure works towards developing accountable relationships analyzing the relationship between power and racism, and shifting structures and processes to create racially equitable outcomes. What does RSJI do? RSJI provides racial equity support to city departments through trainings, technical assistance, hands-on facilitation, and community engagement. This targeted support is holistic and aims to address our environmental, structural, and institutional and individual goals for racial justice. And so, one of the things that we can definitely attribute to the work of RSJI is even just kind of the function of this task force, the idea that in order to move on and to develop projects such as these, that we have to have meaningful community engagement and community partners at the table to be able to move this work forward. And so lastly, just another thing to highlight about the City of Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative and how it's used within the city is that they have this very detailed strategic plan that really was helped or, came out of looking at what happened with COVID and the impacts that that had on our community and how we move the discussion of racial equity forward in city work. And so some of the top goals from their strategic plan that you can definitely see how it has impacted even just the work of this task force is that 1, embed racial equity into City of Seattle's policies and processes. 2, center racial justice, belonging, and well-being. 3, align with community organizing. And 4, collaborate with regional and national racial justice leaders. So these are commitments from the City of Seattle and how they go about making their marker of equity and really looking at racial equity specifically. And so we want to be able to use these tools and help apply this process to our work as well. Later in our presentation, in this meeting, we'll be going over some of the tools that the RSJI department has already supported with the Lake Washington Boulevard Task Force and the project that we're doing. But we wanted to be able to kind of help you all just learn more about the tools that the city uses in order to, when we say move things in an equitable process in a meaningful way, that we want to give an actual definition around what that means. So, we've talked about the Race and Social Justice Initiative, and I don't want to, presume where everyone's understanding and learnings are around racial justice and racism. And so we're just going to go through a few definitions to help ground us so that we're all on the same, hopefully on the same level when we're using these terms around race and social justice and racism. So to define racism, we're going to use the definition that the Race and Social Justice Initiative uses as well, that's adopted from the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. But racism is the form of oppression based on race. Unlike discrimination, oppression takes into account power, who is positioned to hold power and who is positioned not to hold power, as a result of the way society has been set up and functioned for generations. In other words, oppression takes into account agent and target group membership. People who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color are targets of racism. All right. And then I'm going to move us to the next slide. And then we also just want to be really clear that there are 4 types of racism: interpersonal, institutional, structural, and internalized. And so these definitions around race and social justice and racism is really important because we're really going to be looking at the structural and institutional racism and how it plays out in policies, practices, and procedures and decision-making processes within government, so that this group, the Lake Washington Boulevard Task Force, we're going to be cognizant of this as we go about our process so that we can minimize as much as possible the inherent ways that racism is built into our structural processes, our institutional processes, interpersonal, and internalized. All right. And so before we move on to talk about the budget and the outreach strategies. I do just want to pause for a moment because I know some of this was in the handouts that were sent with the email about this meeting, but we did just go through some pretty, higher level concepts around race and social justice and racism. And so a few questions that I have for y'all. The first one, would love to hear if there are any questions that are coming up for folks around why we're using the City of Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative approach and tactics to centering equity in our work. If anyone has questions about what that means and how we'll put that into practice. How are folks' understandings around what we just went through? If folks could type into the chat, 1, I need some extra support in digging into this. I have a few questions around what I just heard, or 5 on a scale of 1 through 5, at the 5 being, I very much know about Race and Social Justice Initiative and what racism means and how this could impact our work. Would love to see where folks are at. If folks want to type that in the chat from a scale of 1 to 5 on how you're feeling about the content that we just went through. Okay. Perfect. Seeing a lot of 5s and close to 5s. Great. All right, well, thank you all. We just wanted to make sure that we had a strong level setting as we go in and dig deeper into building out our strategy and the foundations for our work. Okay, perfect. And so next, I'm going to kick it over to Adonis to talk more about the budget action.
Thank you, Jackie. Jackie, before we move over to the council budget language, Jennifer did, and we should welcome Jennifer. She is with the Friends of Olmsted Park. Welcome to the meeting. It's going to be good to have you here. But she did have a question about if we'll have, actually, do we have time to talk about the assumptions that we are starting with when it comes to, and I'm assuming with RSJI?
Yes, I'd be happy to open it up for that. I know that we went through these slides and you all should have a copy of this PowerPoint as well if you all need to go back through or you want to look at a different slide, please feel free to do that. But would love to open it up for, just where is this landing for people? And also if there are things that folks would like to add to what you just heard about RSJI and how this definition of racism, we're going to be using it throughout our work. So Jennifer, I see your hand is up and I'll pass it to you first.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I don't have my video on. I am scooting home as fast as I can to get somewhere quiet. But I wanted to just clarify that by talking about kind of thinking about assumptions is more as we get into the discussion, not so much about the RSJI actualities, like the framework of it, but more like as we get into the discussion of the outreach and how we're going to do it. I was just wondering if that's like work I should do on my own to do more research and talk with more people about sort of what I see as a universal value. But I'm willing to, I think it's important to kind of question that assumption in this context, where to kind of suss out what is the value that people hold for the Olmsted legacy. And so I just was wondering if there will be time for that, or if that's something that's sort of my job to kind of work on separately. And so either one is fine. Just wanted to kind of be, kind of have a plan in my head.
Thanks, Jennifer. And you broke up a little bit on my end. I don't know if that happened for other folks, but when you were talking about
that is a question, and what it makes me good for this.
Yikes. I don't know if it's if there's a delay on my end, but go ahead, Adonis.
Oh yeah, no problem. And if I'm breaking up, please let me know. I can turn my camera off. But Jennifer, I think this is you bring up a really good point, especially when it comes to outreach and engagement and who's doing the outreach, what are people out there talking about. I think we brought folks in because they are representing specific groups and they're part of different organizations. And so if what you learn in this meeting, we hope that you will go and share with all of the people that you're connected with, and whatever lens you want to put on that is whatever lens you want to put on it. We don't want to definitely tell you not to do that. But what I'm also thinking here too, Jennifer, I think it would be good, and I don't know if this is the meeting here and maybe it's one of our next couple meetings, but to really give folks on this call some background on Friends of Olmsted Park and the Olmsted Park. So actually having you be a part of the presentation if you are up for that, and if the group agrees for that, just so folks can have that grounding and that understanding. I don't know, what do you think of that, Jennifer?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
If you just let me know when and if and how long you'd like me to talk and all that, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Okay, we'll connect offline from this, and then probably one of the next couple of meetings.
Sounds good. That'd be great. Thank you.
Great. So again, we'll keep in our mind what we just heard about the RSJI work, because that's going to be coming up as we move through today's session, that will really be focused around strategy. And so I'm going to kick it to Adonis, who's going to revisit some of that council language that you all specifically asked for at the last meeting, so that we can have a more clear and shared understanding of how we're applying this work moving forward. So I'm going to share the screen again.
All right. So I think this is good to talk about. This came up at the last meeting to revisit the language, and very happy to do so, and then have a discussion around the language. And Terry, I saw your note. You would like to get out of the meeting, connecting the outcomes to this language. So I hope we do have a good discussion about this. So I'll go ahead and read it. I'll read it verbatim so that I'm not interjecting any of my own things on it. This is what the language says here. So this council budget action would add $200,000 of transportation fund to SDOT to develop design concepts for potential changes to Lake Washington Boulevard and solicit community feedback through an equitable outreach and engagement campaign. Next slide, please. So as part of the Keep Seattle Moving program, and that's Keep Moving Seattle. Keep Seattle Moving program in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, SDOT implemented a 3-mile closure of Lake Washington Boulevard to vehicle traffic on weekends from April 2020 through September 2020. The program promoted non-motorized use of the right-of-way to allow greater social distancing and recreational opportunities. In response to ongoing community demand, SDOT re-implemented the program in May 2021 through September 2021. The proposed budget does not include funding to continue the Keep Seattle Moving program in operation for 2022. Next slide. The $200,000 proposed in this council budget action would allow SDOT to develop and evaluate design concepts that promote increased pedestrian and bicycle uses of Lake Washington Boulevard. Options to be considered include two-way protected bike lanes, expansion of existing off-street facilities, and other design concepts. The funding would also allow SDOT to engage in an equitable outreach campaign to gather input on these design options. The outreach campaign should seek inclusive, representative, and meaningful engagement from the surrounding neighborhoods potentially impacted by the proposed design. So if we go to the next slide. In this next slide, this just gives an outline of how projects happen here at SDOT and where we are in this sort of kind of line here. We are at the planning stage of all of this. So we are planning, and what we are doing is we are doing, if we're reading the the council budget action. We're doing the outreach that could lead to design concepts. And these are concepts, these are not, so not the actual designs of the, whatever the road could look like or could be. This is the planning phase. And out of this planning phase, we will have some type of concept, some type of project elements. That is what we are hoping comes out of this process. So rather than developing some designs first, we are talking to people first, and then out of that are the design concepts. So I think we should open it up. We can close the screen too, to questions or comments about this language and where we're at in this process.
Sorry, I had to get in the car to pick up the baby, but I did have questions that other folks didn't. I'm happy to sit back until other folks share their piece. If not, I'll jump in quickly. So from last meeting, it did feel, and there's actually a lot more question marks than I think periods after last meeting, at least for me, because it felt like the discussions we were having were, you all are brought together because you all have a vested interest in communities that you are part of or you represent. And we'd love support, as that's saying, we'd love support to help identify how we best reach out to community. So we were kind of supporting and formulating ideas of the best way to get to community, but we wouldn't be making any recommendations in this group, or there wouldn't be any final decisions made in this group, which is fine. I'm just kind of articulating what I heard. And so it led me to believe that we were really serving as a consultant role, if you will, for a very specific and tactical task, which is how do we best reach out in a marketing way, not in a negative way, but how do we reach out in the most effective way? And it just sounds like there's actual professionals who do that, right? They know what material should go out. They know what color should be used. They know what language should be used. They know what zip codes and what areas certain populations exist in. And I feel personally, I don't have that expertise. I know communities that we can speak to, but I wouldn't say that we are the expert in getting the feedback. And I think we actually have an amazing group of folks here that have knowledge and experience that could speak to final solutions. But I think from last talk, again, I'd love to get clarification. It didn't feel like we were that group. We were just a group helping identify how best to reach out. So we're kind of an intermediary.
And yeah, it's a good question for clarification, Edwin. Jackie, if you could share the PowerPoint again, I want to jump to the next slide real quick, and then we can just share it and we can turn it off. And this is something definitely we can talk about as well. So what we're working towards, and Edwin, I'm going to really try to address what, but I'm going to start here. But here's what we're working towards. We are working towards some type of report back to SDOT leadership and city council, right? And that report could be a summary of the outreach that we do, recommendations for various different project features or project elements, and then some draft concepts, real high level cross sections that our graphic designer would put together of what Lake Washington Boulevard could look like. Now that doesn't mean it could look like it have a bike lane. Maybe it does. We don't know. That's the process we want to try to go through here, right? And then what the next steps are. What are those next steps that we could, in some sense, recommend to SDOT leadership and city council? The thing we have to keep in mind, and we'll talk about the budget here in a second, is the money that we have is strictly for the outreach and to develop some high level concepts. That is all the money we have. We don't have any money going forward to implement anything, to be completely frank, right? So we could say we want to do this, we want to do that, but there's another step there, and that is to actually get the funding to do that. And that's sort of what this is about. Like, if you're going to have funding, what do you want to do? So I just want to clarify what we're working towards. And so what we are hoping the task force is going to help us with is developing an outreach strategy and helping us implement that outreach to go out and talk to people about what their values are, how they see Lake Washington Boulevard, what they feel is missing, or what is the issue, what is the concern with Lake Washington Boulevard, what's the opportunity, right? And some of these, going back to this slide here, these are examples. Like, what did the community say? What are their priorities? Is safety, access, bike pedestrian safety? Are these all things that people value? What are some of the features that people would want to see down there? Do they want us to update the street design? Do they want us to restripe the lanes? Do they want us to expand the bike and pedestrian facilities, right? And all of this funnels down into what could be, what will be some type of report with some graphics and words that show, like, we went out and we talked to 1,000 people, and here's what they said, and here is sort of the output of what they said. Here's what they said. So in some sense, yes, we bring community members together because, like I said in the last meeting, SDOT has had a way of doing outreach, and you can stop sharing, Jackie. We've always had a way of doing outreach, and it works for the most part. But we're really moving towards this transportation equity framework, where we really want the outreach to come from the people, right? Because often we go out and we do the outreach and people say, you didn't talk to these people, you didn't talk to these people. And okay, so we go talk to those people, but it's really helpful to bring together a good group of people who are connected to the community to help us, right? Edwin, like, who are those people that we should be talking to? And yes, we have our graphic designers, we can make the flyers, and we'll support in that sense. But really what we are hoping to get from you all is to come up with a strategy to get to developing that report, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I don't mean to make it sound like it's knocking you out. I appreciate it, because in many ways you're right. It's communities have said, you don't reach out to our folks. You haven't reached out to the people that we know. And it sounds and is beautiful. You say, well, let's reach out to the community so we can better reach the community, which makes wonderful sense to me. But if we're saying we'll help with articulating an outreach plan, I feel like our perhaps time and or knowledge is probably best if there's folks who are like, here's options that we can pursue, and we can say we could go this way. Because I'm just thinking, like, 4 hours, for example, today is quite a long time to think about how we're coming up with an outreach plan when there's a few ways to go, and maybe the expertise can be more refined and saying, hey, here's 4 or 5 options. Maybe we choose one, or we decide to go a different way, but at least it's a bit more guided.
That is fair. A couple of things run through my head, but I wanted a couple other people have their hands up too.
I saw Joey's hand go up first, and then we'll pass it over to you on.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to kind of say my viewpoint on this. I think that once someone has gone ahead and, like you said, some of their professionals who do polls and no particular questions asked, but once that poll is created, sometimes people have already been left out of the process. And I think that the collective that we have here right now has the ability to inject some things in there that may not show up on something that somebody from St. Louis may put together as a poll. So those things could be appreciation for natural history and being in the outdoors, conservation, access for people with disabilities, culture, including local culture. So I think those are some of the things that, as this group is put together, we can actually make sure those things are reflected in whatever type of polling goes out there.
Thank you. Yuan?
So I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct. It sounds like we're actually not sure what the goal of the redesign will be. Like, you gave up examples saying, well, values could be bike and pedestrian safety, it could be access. But it sounds to me like our goal is to actually definitively say what the values of the community are before the actual redesign team comes in to implement those values.
Yes, to some degree. It would be good to go and talk to the people, hear what their vision is, hear what their, what are their goals for Lake Washington Boulevard, this beautiful boulevard down there, right? And then through that, we can develop cross-section or high-level concepts. We can develop project elements because it may be safety, it may be traffic calming, it may be cultural. And then from there, we can take those elements and start to design something. And then obviously run those back by the task force and say, is this kind of matching what you heard?
All right, thanks.
Stand up too.
Perfect. Carrie, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the reason I brought this up is I think there was a little bit of a theme in our last meeting about the importance of trying to come up with something real tangible by the end of our process and not have it sort of end up being a very inconclusive way to go. And I think that was the intent of the language of the ordinance, was to provide this money so that there is an outcome, specifically something that the city council could then take under consideration after SDOT has worked it up, to be able to actually fund, because that's the next step after the design, is that city council will have to come up with the money to do whatever it is we propose. And so if we cannot come up with a conclusion that's somewhat definitive at the end, then it just leaves the whole process more up in the air. So I think that's just an important thing for us to maintain an interest in. Another thing that I think could be added to the list of considerations is, and I know that SDOT will have opinions about this, but you're listing bike lanes and all that other stuff. I think another relevant question is whether or not this should any longer be an arterial. It is designated by the city as an arterial. There are efforts in other parts of the city to de-arterialize roads. And this has a number of design implications in terms of, you can then add a lot more stop signs, you can put in much bigger speed bumps. You can make it still a way for people to go, but not a way for as much traffic to go in there. So I would just request that that be added to one of the considerations, or at least a lens for looking at this. But mostly, I think it's really important that we come up with something as tangible as possible at the end of our process.
So I have a question for folks, and I don't need an answer now, but what I'm picking up, and I did have this in the slide, I don't know, in the slides, I don't know if I still have it in there, I might have taken it out, but it sounds like there's folks who are really interested in helping to really craft what that outreach looks like. There are folks who want to get into some of the weeds about like the designs and the concepts and what those look like. We don't have to answer the question, but I will put it out there. Folks are interested in some type of subcommittees of, folks who want to just focus on just the outreach and who we're talking to and what that looks like. Other folks who want to focus on, what the report looks like and what it says, just because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. And like Edwin was saying, you bring everybody together for a long meeting, or there's multiple meetings, when maybe there's a group of folks who are just like, hey, we just want to focus on who you're talking to make sure you're talking to the right people. Other folks want to make sure that that report looks good. So I'm just going to put it out there. If that's something folks are interested in, and then we could break up into smaller groups and then report back to the bigger group on what those things are. So just putting it out there, because I think we all have the same goal, but folks have maybe a little bit more interest or want to, dedicate their time a little bit more to one specific thing versus everything. So, and you can email or put it in the chat if that's something you're interested in, but we can talk about that more.
Can I say something?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I really don't mean, I really hope this doesn't come across as rude. But I really think that a lot of this is a waste of time. I think that based on the group here, I think there are a couple of clear, or at least maybe we should list out a couple of assumptions in terms of goals that I think would be that we can be very quick about. I think that it would be foolish, for example, to say that we're going to come out and completely ban cars from like Washington Boulevard, just because I don't think that that would be acceptable to some of the folks here, and I want to respect that. I think that it would be foolish to say that we don't make any changes and we say that it, like the way it is currently is acceptable from a safety perspective. And I think that if we just quickly start with these assumptions, and of course, please correct me if I'm wrong about these, I think we can cut out a lot of the work and jump to the meat of the issue about why we're all here. And I think that if we just spend our time constantly doing the same work over and over again, it's just a waste of $200,000 from the city. Please, someone correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that I just feel like this is such a waste of time. Thank you.
Patricia has her hand up.
I think that our goal, I think we need goals, and I don't think our goals are at all clear. For example, I'll tell you why. I thought I thought Friends of Sewer Park as representing them was here specifically to make sure that the communities up and down the Boulevard have a voice. So I honestly didn't think it was design was up to us at all, because it's not SDOT's, it's Park's lead on that. So I don't know how we can accomplish both, honestly, especially if we split up and just lose half the group because half the group is many of the group. We have a very, very, very lopsided representation here in terms of cycling. So I would like for us to actually clarify our goal. And I would like to be transparent about our meetings. And I would think that's a way to engage people.
And we can, yes, we'll get to that. Edwin's got his hand up.
Yeah, real quick, and Ron, I appreciate you sharing that. One thought I was having, and talked to a few other folks, is that, and I don't think it's on you all, the facilitators here. I think the city actually should be making clear what our goal is, right? Is our goal to limit pedestrian and cycling accidents? If that's the goal, then it should be made clear. If the goal is to lower traffic, that's another goal. If the goal is to solely increase the ability for folks to get on bicycles, that's another goal, which isn't necessarily associated with safety and or traffic. And I don't think the city has, and when I say city, I think the council, when they passed the resolution for this 200,000, that was made clear in the language. And if they're asking us to come up with that, I think that is a long conversation to have. But it would be important because, as folks mentioned, there are different interests, but there may be a place where we coalesce, right? And if the coalescing is, we want people to be able to drive through their neighborhood, we want them to be safe on bicycles and walking, and we want more people on bikes, there may be a place for us to meet there. But we have to be clear if we're going to ask the community what we want clarity on.
Is that a conversation you all are willing to have to clarify the goal? So I'm gonna have to turn it back to my facilitator. I'm not a facilitator on how to, you know, I've been part of facilitation and the whiteboards, and people start writing stuff on the whiteboards and stuff like that. So if that's something we should do now, but I want to turn it over to my facilitator to help us figure out, because yes, you have that power to do that. If that's going to help get us to the next step, I would probably say, let's do that and let's get that out of the way so that we can move on to how are we going to go, and we're going to talk to people about what that goal is for Lake Washington Boulevard.
All right, perfect. And I feel like with how this budget action was developed, that this task force, we do have the opportunity to shape that and then use that to be able to shape the type of outreach and what we're outreaching for. So, okay, thank you, everybody. So what we're actually going to do then is kind of skip ahead to a few places, a few slides later that we were going to touch on, because I feel like the activity that we had planned for later could actually help serve this purpose that you all are asking to do right now. And so let me see, let me just get us to the correct slide. Okay. So share my screen again for y'all, and we're just going to be okay. So earlier when we were talking about the Race and Social Justice Initiative and how that department in the government has already started to support with some of this work, one of the things that they did was a condensed racial equity report to try to dig into what it is that we know about Lake Washington Boulevard when it comes to equity and racial equity. And then also some of the SDOT staff who've been supporting with this project were able to dig into some of the census data. And so this next part, I feel like, is going to help us dig deeper into setting up the goals around what you all are wanting to accomplish as this task force. So some of the things that we know about Lake Washington Boulevard and Southeast Seattle, so not just looking at Lake Washington Boulevard in a vacuum, but again, some of the things that we've heard from y'all is thinking about the surrounding areas such as Rainier Avenue, MLK, and other streets. But residents on and near Lake Washington Boulevard tend to be wealthier and less diverse than the rest of Southeast Seattle. Home values provide an illustration of this trend. Typical home values along the boulevard range from $1.5 million to $3 million, far above averages for both Southeast Seattle and the city or region as a whole. During the redlining in the 1930s, the area around Lake Washington Boulevard was graded as B, still desirable, indicating that historically it has been a part of the city deemed safer for capital, namely residential mortgages. The proportion of BIPOC residents is also lower than the surrounding census tracts, both today and historically. We were able to pull the updated 2020 census tract data for race, whereas the rest of the information shared is based on the 2010 census tract or later American Community Survey data. Compared to the 2010 census tract, the updated 2020 census shows a trend of BIPOC communities in South Seattle neighborhoods that is generally shrinking in proportion. The two largest minority communities in the neighborhood are Asian and Black. There's a significant percentage of young adults, youth who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, and transit riders in this neighborhood. And then the last thing that we want to highlight when it comes to race and racial demographics around Lake Washington Boulevard in Southeast Seattle is that the city's growth and equity analysis, a tool used in the 2035 comprehensive plan, shows that residents in the areas around Lake Washington Boulevard have a much lower risk of displacement compared to other parts of the Rainier Valley and Southeast Seattle. However, access to opportunity in the neighborhoods closest to the boulevard is lower given the relative lack of businesses and services other than parks. So, we have a few things going on here. We have Lake Washington Boulevard that has historically been invested or supported by our city better than other areas in Southeast Seattle, such as Rainier Avenue, MLK, which is why these areas look so different. What we're also seeing is that when it comes to racial demographics, and income levels, is that, again, Lake Washington Boulevard looks a lot different than the surrounding areas in Southeast Seattle. And of course, I'm sure most of us already know about Southeast Seattle is that the population of community colors, Black, Indigenous, people of color, is shrinking year by year when we look at the census tracts. And so the reason why we wanted to talk about these different data points and these observations is that, again, when we're thinking about equity and what we're centering in this work and the implications of changes to Lake Washington Boulevard, it's really important that we're naming equity as looking at racism and racial equity and how we're going to apply that to this work. And so I'm just going to back up a little bit. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we all had a very clear understanding on is the idea of gentrification that I think it was brought up in the first meeting, actually, that oftentimes when we do changes and improvements to areas, that this comes about and can bring on and is a part of the process of gentrification. That, if we have neglected areas, or if we're not investing in improvements in other areas the same way that we're doing or could possibly doing in Lake Washington Boulevard, who's impacted by that? How does that fit in historically to what's happened in our city? And so I want to play this quick video on gentrification so that we can all have kind of a level set definition of what that means. Let me make sure that I can share the sound as well. Okay, share screen and share sound.
Perhaps you've heard the word gentrification mentioned in the news, in the industry you're working in, or maybe even in some political context. Well, gentrification is happening more and more in the world around us, so it's important to understand what people are talking about when they rattle off this word. Gentrification is the process of a low-income and sometimes crime-ridden urban area transforming into a more upscale and affluent area. Gentrification is usually initiated by affluent residents and businesses moving into an area that is accompanied by the renovation and reconstruction of buildings, parks, and other local amenities. It involves both economic and demographic change and a change in the overall makeup of the people who live in the area. As the area improves and becomes more desirable, property values, rents, and the cost of living will also become more expensive. Gentrification can result in displacing residents who may have lived in the area their entire life, but all of a sudden are unable to afford the higher cost of living, forcing them to move. Gentrification is somewhat of a controversial subject. In most cases, the areas that experience gentrification are initially low-income minority communities. And as the area improves and prices increase, it's the more educated and affluent residents that tend to benefit from the change because these residents are the ones who can actually afford to stay. It's the less educated, lower income households that are negatively impacted by gentrification. And this isn't just with renters either. Homeowners may own their property outright but see such a big increase in property taxes they can no longer afford to live in the area. Gentrification does not occur in every urban city, and it usually doesn't happen in the poorest, most dangerous neighborhoods either. Typically there needs to be some kind of cultural opportunity in order for gentrification to occur. If you like this video, be sure to check out the full.
All right, so again, we want to be able to have a level set of this information because what we see happening on Lake Washington, or what we see on Lake Washington Boulevard, is not the same as what we see in the Southeast Seattle area, and that there's reasons behind that. That's due to racism, it's due to gentrification. And so again, if we're going to be doing things or proposing things or setting a framework for changes on Lake Washington Boulevard, how are we minimizing any unintentional or intentional harm or impact that we've continued to see a trend in Southeast Seattle neighborhood, in the city of Seattle, when it comes to gentrification, when it comes to displacement, and knowing that projects like these are how these type of things can happen. And so with that, are there any questions around gentrification or this data that we have around what Lake Washington Boulevard looks like in respect to the rest of Southeast Seattle? All right. Okay, if there are things that come up for folks, please do not hesitate to come off mute or raise your hand or type it into the chat. So the tool that we're going to use to kind of help ground us in the conversation and build this foundation for our framework, and also help us to decide what our larger goal is going to be, is actually using tools from the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, which again is what the RSJI, the Race and Social Justice Initiative of Seattle, has used. And one of the big things about the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond that they're very well known for are the principles that they bring to policies and community organizing and making changes in collaboration with community. And we're going to be borrowing a few of those principles to help us guide this work, which the thought process is, if we can think about some of these questions around undoing the harm caused by racism, learning from history, building and or supporting the leadership in local communities, reshaping gatekeeping, such as what will accountability throughout this project look like, it will help us answer the question around what the long-term goals and vision for the use of Lake Washington Boulevard should look like. But I think it's really important to have some of these deeper discussions about how we're going to keep this work together, keep equity centered in this work, keep community centered in this work before we get to the question of long-term goals, because then that's how we can make sure that what we're saying for our long-term goals and short-term goals connects back to an actual strategy. And so this process of a strategy chart, again, is a tool adopted by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. I've used it a lot of times with different groups and collectives to help ground people in what it is that is most important to folks and their values, and how we come back to those values and those principles, and make sure that the work that we're doing is actually coming back to what we said we wanted to do as a collective. And so what you all brought up around, okay, so what are the goals of Lake Washington Boulevard? Is it pedestrian safety? Is it less cars on Lake Washington Boulevard? All these different ideas. If we could think about principles, and again, having racial equity as our North Star in this work, then we can get to this question around what the long-term vision for community use of Lake Washington Boulevard looks like. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions coming up for folks about what we're going to do? All right, I see Ty, you have your hand up.
I'm trying to figure out how to articulate what I want to say. I want to amplify what Yuan brought up, in that I think it would be helpful to begin this conversation with base assumptions on the table, because I think that we are all coming to this work with different priorities. And if we can set out from the beginning what our priorities are, the groups that we represent, I think it will give us a base of how to move forward. So as Yuan said, there are some of us, I will raise my hand, that are concerned about access for motor vehicles. And there's a real concern by the people that I interact with that it will be closed permanently to motor vehicles. I also gather from this call that there are a lot of people that have a real concern about cyclist and pedestrian safety and how that can be improved. So I think if we can start with some base assumptions, there's a real concern that neighborhoods along Lake Washington Boulevard are not being heard. If we can start by putting our priorities on the table, it will give us a better understanding of how to move forward and how we can come to hopefully some sort of group consensus or support. It's clear that everyone here loves Lake Washington Boulevard. It's clear that everyone here uses Lake Washington Boulevard in different ways. And I think that the goal is, how do all of these entities coexist? Because to take away access from one group or another is the definition of inequity and gentrification. And so can we start from what our assumptions are, understanding the RSJI piece, but I don't feel like we're starting all on the same page.
All right, Ty, I'm gonna put up a screen or a document on the screen and we can start with this. I tried to start capturing what you started with, but let's see. Let's go around as a group and go through this. So how about we start with you, Ty, and what some of your
Sure. And maybe not assumptions, but like can we just put on the table what is each person's priority? Like the group that you're representing, like what is the priority for that group? So for me, the group of community members that I represent, our priority is to make sure that motor vehicles still have access to Lake Washington Boulevard, with the understanding that there need to be some safety improvements for cyclists and pedestrians.
All right, I'm gonna go in order of who I see on my screen. Patricia, would you like to go next? And maybe yours is already captured around neighborhoods around Lake Washington Boulevard not being heard. But if there's anything else you would like to add.
Yes, gotten a lot of email through Francis Stewart Park that there is so many people who feel like ignored and unheard, and sadly also very suspicious about any process the city initiates around this. And some people have the fear that it's kind of a process for something the city's already decided on, but sort of like a going through the motions. So my only goal is for us to hear from the people in the neighborhoods. And, it's not just the people who live on Lake Washington Boulevard, though. It affects most of several, or at least half of several zip codes down here. So my hope is that we put a lot of resources into getting a public process going.
Thank you, Patricia. Let's see, next I have Yuan.
Yes, my priority would be pedestrian and cyclist safety. Well, safety for anybody rolling, as well as increased access to Lake Washington Boulevard. I think it can definitely be difficult to get there sometimes, depending if you don't have a car, even. And finally, a big priority of mine is to actually reach a consensus in this group. because what I'm really worried about is I think Terry spoke to this a little. What I'm really worried about is that we're going to get through all of this and we're still not going to come to a consensus, or we're going to come to a consensus that only half the group likes, but is something that half the group really hates. And I don't think that that's great. So I guess you can add that to Patricia's actually making sure that everybody feels heard.
Thank you, Yuan. I'm going to go to, it looks like next on my screen is Edwin.
Hell yeah, I'll be quick. I think a priority of mine was ensuring that folks from racial and ethnic diverse backgrounds get access to the park, however they do or want to get there. And simultaneously, it would be great to know the safety issues that do exist on the boulevard and work to decrease those. And so I don't have issues with cars being there as long as we are having close to none fatalities, because we have Black and brown folks on bikes and walking who won't ride on there unless it's shut down. And I would like them to feel safe even if it doesn't shut down on the weekend. There's a way to be protected and getting folks to be able to drive in their car or roll in any way that they do.
Thank you, Edwin. Next I see is Terry.
So a couple of things just before you're even writing down. I am with the Rainier Valley Greenways and Safe Streets. I want to be sure that everybody, I know a few of you feel that all we are about is bicycling. I haven't been on a bike in 25 years probably. So I come at this from the state safe streets, pedestrian walking perspective. And so I voiced in our first meeting my concern that I saw so much more traffic over the years that I've been there that it's becoming more of a heavy traffic corridor and less of a, which to me diminishes its park value. So Rainier Valley Greenways would support what they call a hybrid model, which is closing the North Mile and having a one-way street in the South Mile. That is Seattle Neighborhood Greenways and Rainier Valley's position. I have a much more nuanced position. I've lived in the neighborhood a long time, and I've studied a number of different models, and my feeling is there are lots of different ways to do this. The goal should be to reduce particularly the commuting volume and to enhance the park experience, which go hand in hand. Less cars makes it a better park experience. And there's a lot of ways to achieve this in terms of schedules in the year. But I'm not trying to, I don't want to see cars prohibited from the boulevard as much as I would like to see less cars, less speed, less volume, and safer for everyone who's doing everything else.
Next on my screen, I see Jennifer.
Hi there. So I'm here as a representative of the Friends of Seattle's Olmsted Parks, and I would say our priorities are first, the park system experience that Olmsted intended. So that would be the chain of boulevards and parks extending, you know, the simplest version is from Seward Park to Washington Park, but it extends north and south and east west from there. And then so that's the chain of experiences, but also the diversity of experiences that you can get from the hilltop views to the shoreline views. And you can experience it if he'd had his way with a much wider boulevard that has separate rights of way for each type of travel. But that's not quite what we ended up with. So we have this tension. The other elements I would say are to preserve public access. That's, you know, the primary goal of reserving this for park land along the shoreline, was to ensure that the public had access. But I would add to that, one of the challenges is the relationship between who gets to live closest to these public parks and who has a harder time accessing them as far as getting to them. And but then also who feels welcome and comfortable there. And I've heard in conversations I've had about invisible barriers, that if and so one of our concerns is that any barrier to access would amplify any invisible barriers. And by that, I mean racial and economic feeling uncomfortable. And so that's one of the things, is to look at not just the passive public access, but also the active, ensuring that actions are being taken to make sure that everyone feels welcome and comfortable and that this is part of their park system. So that would be the elements that we're looking at. And I see a lot of room in there. I'm very encouraged actually by the conversation that we've had so far, that there are a lot of possibilities for a middle ground here, that we can meet these goals that we all have.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next on my screen is Zachary.
Good morning, Zachary Fleet. It now looks as though it's clear that I'm on this task force because of my involvement with the Mount Baker Community Club and being a board member and the vice president. And I guess that wasn't altogether clear. And so in the context of what my goals are, I guess my goals should be immaterial because I'm here representing an organization. If I were to speak as to what the Mount Baker Community Club's goals would be, I'd have to place that in the context of goals for what. I don't really know what the commission is here. I don't know what we're specifically being asked to do. And so based on that, I'm not sure. If it's to come up with recommendations for how to utilize Lake Washington Boulevard, I certainly can speak to that. And my hope is that I can be a conduit of information for my group and to give members the opportunity for input. I sort of echo some of the previous statements or comments about that there is a lot of what I would call suspicion related to what parks and SDOT's goals are. I would place all of this in the context of yesterday. It appears that SDOT's new leader search concluded in choosing someone from LA to run SDOT. And that person has perhaps their own new list of priorities with respect to what they want or don't want. I would like to think that Seattle has a history of at least attempting to be inclusive when decisions are being made that will affect many other people. We certainly have come up short in many situations, but at least that has been sort of an undercurrent of local school districts, local politics, local city council. It appears as though what this was a councilwoman indicating she wanted this funded so that we could get more feedback. I think that it's not going to be a waste of our time, even if it's just giving each of us a place to vent and giving Adonis some ideas about things that can be done. I would note that 2 days ago in the San Francisco Chronicle was an article about a very similar situation that they've encountered, and they have something called the Great Highway. I'm not exactly sure exactly where it is. I can send a link to the article, but same thing, it was closed completely during the pandemic to all traffic for some periods of time. And now they're commissioning studies and even an initiative to perhaps keep it closed during certain times. And they're currently saying certain weekends, much like what's currently happening. But I'm sort of rambling. I think if you're asking what someone's goal is, it has to be in the context of what's the question you're asking. And I find that, at least in law, you go back to the statute, you read it, and you see what it says. And perhaps that would be a good practice, is for us to actually read what the city council ordinance says. And that might give us a much better idea of how we should frame our participation in meeting those goals. But with that, Adonis did send me a link. I can't open it for whatever reason. And Adonis, is that the language of the statute that funded this? And does it say anything that might be helpful in terms of what it is that we should be trying to accomplish?
It's the council budget action. And I apologize if you can't open it. I thought I uploaded a PDF. Other folks give it a shot, and then if not, then
for some reason, when somebody is screen sharing, I'm not able to
gotcha.
do certain things. It's almost like they're requiring me to look at their slides, if that makes sense.
Fair enough.
So Zachary, you can go to the top and do exit full screen. If you go to that green box at the top and it says view options and you do exit full screen, then you can do all the things you want to do.
And I'm also putting into the chat the council budget action language as well. Sorry, it's
Thank you.
will look really small. And we can also revisit those slides as well. Let's see. Terry, I see that your hand is up. I'm wondering if you could put your question into the chat so that we could table it, because Zachary, if you are done, then I will pass it to the last person who I see on my screen, which is Joey. But did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Not for now, and I'm just trying to read that now, which
No
certainly seems to be helpful.
Develop design concepts.
Okay, I'm gonna put you
And solicit.
Okay, perfect. So then let's pass it to Joey.
Yeah, so though I am the director of the Sewer Park Audubon Center, which is at the end of Lake Washington Boulevard, I'm not here as a representative of that organization, but I just want to use my 13 years of experience talking to and dealing with and working with people who do use Lake Washington Boulevard. I travel Lake Washington Boulevard at least 5 times a day. I'm sorry, 5 times a week from Leschi. And I've been doing that for 13 years. And I've seen how the Lake Washington Boulevard has been used. It's an amazing place where people gather. Those are people who are new immigrants to this area and to this region, as well as people who've been here through years who find spots along Lake Washington Boulevard to commune or to go fishing or to listen to music. And I recognize the value that that place has there. I also know people who ride Lake Washington Boulevard on a bicycle every working day, regardless of the weather or other circumstances. And I'm concerned about their safety for doing this year after year. And so I think, when we look at this situation, I think what we're trying to do at some level, there is a tug of war over how this road will be used. And I think that's partly because we may be limiting our vision of what it is, using its current status as this road that was really narrow to begin with, that we want to try to carve out space for bicycles. And my hope is that we can look at this thing, Lake Washington Boulevard, as part of a whole revitalization of this area that could include a natural area. I think big projects get big money, and an investment in the South area that will also, provide opportunities, I think is the biggest thing here. If we are just looking at this concept of cars versus bicycles versus pedestrians, opening and closing on this narrow street, I think we're going to revisit this thing again and again and again. Ultimately, I think we need to come up with a solution that may require the city put a big investment in figuring out how do we manage this thing so cars can continue to go here, because I truly believe that if we were to, as we're moving forward with the closure of lanes on Rainier Avenue, I think by closing Lake Washington Boulevard, we're going to see increased traffic in areas that include schools and churches. Because I know when Lake Washington Boulevard is closed, I'm having to force to go to those places, and I go by schools and churches on 30th, 38th, Genesee, and so on. So I think that we really need to be robust in our thinking, not look for whatever is going to be the quick solution. I think, a big project like this may require years to actually figure out and put into place. But I do think that the ability to figure out a solution is there. And that's my big hope.
Thank you, Joey. And I'm sorry, maybe just for my own curiosity, when you say that you travel and use Lake Washington Boulevard, do you do that by car, bike, or other?
I do that by car. Yes.
Okay.
I've tried bicycling it, and I don't find it to be very safe, at least at my level of skill by cycling.
Okay. Sorry, I was just curious because I heard you talk about.
And I would certainly be open to, for instance, broadening the whole conversation and what we not taking what's been given to us. Would there not be an opportunity for Metro to run a bus line that takes you up from one end to the other on Lake Washington Boulevard and providing more opportunities? So, like I said, I think we've been giving a certain piece of land to fight over and not realize all the opportunities are there. Because like Jennifer was saying, this is an Olmsted park and part of the Olmsted legacy. I've literally given people directions on how to follow Lake Washington Boulevard as part of an Olmsted tour. And these folks were visiting from Portland. So honoring that part of the history is also an opportunity too.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I did put up there what you wrote in the chat, Terry, around importance of mitigating traffic impacts on adjoining neighborhoods. Okay, perfect. So Adonis, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to thank Ty and Yuan for kicking us off with just this conversation. It's been super helpful to me. And as someone who had the strange idea to bring people together to talk about Lake Washington Boulevard when we got this money, this is exactly what I was hoping to conversation to have, because we could have gone in a totally different route and we all wouldn't be on these screens right now. So just thank you for kicking that off. And I just wanted, in a nutshell, I took notes of what everyone what I'm facilitator, who's the person, but just what I'm picking up on what people said is, people want to maintain access for everyone, whether you're in a car, on a bike, you're rolling in some kind of way, but reducing the traffic that's on Lake Washington Boulevard is key, making it safe for people. And so those are kind of just the high level things: maintain access, and just not just access on Lake Washington Boulevard, but how people get there. And I hear you, Joey. Where's Metro in the conversation in getting people around in the South End, for starters, especially if they want to get down to Lake Washington Boulevard, and maybe they don't want to drive down there, but they want to take the bus down there so that they can go enjoy the lake. That's a thing, right? But also maintaining the park feel. And I appreciate what Jennifer was saying just about the experience and the invisible barriers to Lake Washington Boulevard. So those are just some of the things I'm picking up. But most importantly, if that was a goal, how do we maintain access? How do we make it safer? How do we mitigate the traffic that's down there? But what I'm also hearing is how and who do we talk to about this? Because it doesn't make me feel good that folks in Mount Baker neighborhood are suspicious of the process, right? So there's a problem there that folks are like, wait, SDOT's already made a decision here. What's going on? They're just, because that's not what we're doing at all. And that's probably why even in this kind of early phase, we're at a little bit of a like, all right, what are we doing here? because we really don't have a plan. That's why we brought folks together to come up with a plan, but it's very important to keep people involved. So in a nutshell, access, safety, mitigating the traffic, maintaining the experience. And then if we go out and talk to people about the best way to do that, let's make sure we talk to everyone and be transparent about what that process is. So that's just me kind of summarizing the notes that I took. And hopefully we can build off of that. So I really appreciate folks starting with that because that was helpful for me.
Hey, Donna.
There I end up, yeah.
That, for me, that feels like a good statement of our work. Like, I feel like that grounds our work and we have a sense of what we're here to do. And I would love to hear from other people, but I have a better sense of how we can move forward collectively now, understanding that we might have different priorities, but ultimately, ultimately they equate to access for everyone in a safe way. But if there's some way that we can, have, yeah, is that our mission statement or what have you, that feels good to me. And I'm curious what other people think.
I agree. I think that we're in a much better position from here rather than going out and asking people what I feel like we've already had this conversation over and over again, just within our own communities. So I feel like we have a good starting point.
One thing we can do for the folks that aren't here is we can summarize this and just make sure that in our follow-up, here's what we've come up with in this group here, and if folks want to add to it, or if they agree or don't agree, but we can follow up with the other folks who aren't on this call.
All right, great. Okay, so when I want us to be able to go and have a little bit of a break since this is a longer meeting. I feel like we were able to move through some important information around thinking about what our assumptions and priorities for this group is. When we come back, we'll talk about the communities that we're connected to, and then who else we need to be reaching out to, and then what we're going to do to get there. And I think what we'll do is look at the budget that we have for this work so that we can think about our outreach strategies. So I'll just copy and paste what it is that folks wrote again, or what we discussed in this section right now. So if you're not taking a full-on break, but you want something to look at, feel free to do that. It will be in the chat. But let's say we'll come back at, let's come back at 3:05. Does that sound good to everybody? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in a different time zone. Okay, I'm sorry. Over there for you all, it is 12:51. So I'm sorry. Let's come back at what would that be for y'all? Oh God, why can't I do math right now? Okay, let's come back at, I think it's 1:05 your time. Okay, perfect. And then for SDOT staff, I'm going to put you into a breakout room. So I'm sorry, you're not going to get a break. Perfect. Okay, Jennifer, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just had a question, kind of going back to what Yuan was saying, is that it's not so much that we're going to reduce, maintain, it's that we're gonna, I think, identify possible strategies for that that can be kind of put out for public comment or feedback. And it's, you know, just so that like we're not going to come up with the ways that this can actually be done, but kind of, am I understanding right? Like it seems like we're just looking at gathering feedback on different possibilities. Would that be right? And does everybody think that like that needs to be refined, or is it fine? I think that's just assumed.
Yeah, I will defer to SDOT staff, but I believe that yes, that that is how this process is going to fold out.
Thanks.
Yes, and Adonis said yes, that sounds right.
That does sound right. The idea would be to go out and ask for ways or ideas or people's visions for how to do that.
Perfect. Anybody else would want to add or change anything to this statement here on the screen? So if we're saying that these are the goals, as those of you who are in community who use Lake Washington Boulevard and care about Lake Washington Boulevard, that what we hope to do throughout this project is get feedback from those in the community and who also use Lake Washington Boulevard on how we can make these goals a realization for Lake Washington Boulevard. And I see Ty wrote into the chat, I feel like some folks as representatives of larger groups may already have ideas for how to reach these goals. And we are also seeking engagement from the larger community. I believe that is correct. Just want to confer with any SDOT staff. Okay, perfect. I see Adana said yes. Let's see. Did I see Terry's hand go up?
Yeah, this is really a quick wordsmith thing. The ensure that everyone is heard. That's a little bit of a risky word to use so far as I mean, it's a great goal, but if people come back and say, well, I wasn't heard, you failed to ensure. And so I think it's more of a, it's aspirational. So I'm not sure. I don't like ensure because I just think it puts us in a box and it sets us up for failure. So I would use a different word for that. That's all.
Anybody else feel? Okay, I see Adonis is suggesting we say work towards. But does everyone feel okay if we were to say work towards? Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. So with that, if this is what our goals are, then this sounds like now, Adonis, you have some great language to be able to start using in the outreach events that you have coming up in the next few weeks to let people know about the work of this task force and what these high level goals are, which will be great for your outreach. So let's move on to specifically listing out the communities who we are connected to. Again, as we start the outreach process, that it's going to be important that we hear from you all who the communities are that we should be outreaching to, so that we can kind of create this map. And then once we look at the budget, it will give us an idea of how we can actually do that outreach. And so kind of similar to earlier, if we're able to just kind of go one by one, if you are connected to specific communities or specific groups, would love to hear those listed off. And then we can think about who else we need to reach out to and who's missing from this. So let's start with you, Jennifer.
Okay, so Friends of Seattle's Olmsted Park. And then I would also add that the Link to Lake group in Rainier Beach, they're doing so much work to connect to the Boulevard, kind of mitigate the disconnection there, that I think it'd be great to reach out to them to be part of the discussion.
You said that was Link to Lake?
Yeah, Link letter 2 or number 2 to Lake, and that's the Beersheba Park group that are also working on the Henderson Street connection to the Link rail station.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Let's see, Terry, I know you've listed off a couple Seattle Green pathways, but you're next on.
I could provide you with a very long list. So, we're doing outreach ourselves for the couple of the closures that are coming up. But there's a number of organizations. So what I should do is I should just I'll submit a list to Adonis on that.
Perfect, thank you. All right. Next on my screen is Ty.
So I can put this in the chat, but thinking about communities in South Seattle that might not be right next to Lake Washington Boulevard, but there's Asian Counseling Referral Services, East African Community Services, the Urban League, Filipino Community of Seattle, NAACP, Rainier Beach Action Coalition, El Centro de la Raza, and probably a few more, but I'm thinking about particularly immigrant communities, what Joey said, the way that, other ways that people use LWB in the surrounding parks. So I can put that in the chat if you want.
Thank you. Actually was able to capture all of those, and you made me think of another group, Ty, actually, that's working with El Centro on some environmental issues on Beacon Hill, that I know a lot of elders from the Beacon Hill neighborhood are part of that work. So thank you for that list of folks. Patricia, I see that you are next.
So I'm a founding member of Friends of Seward Park. I'm not on the board, but I'm still a member. And so in our only, so far, obviously this will be something that we can discuss going forward, but our only commitment so far is to helping whatever way we can so that the communities along the Lake Washington Boulevard in Southeast Seattle here are heard. Specifically, I live on Orca Street in Seward Park, right down the hill from our mayor. And so my other ties in terms of up and down Renelle Valley are, I'm on the steering committee for Detective Cookie Chess Club. So that we also have ties to the whole activation happening around the Safeway down there. And then also I ties to volunteer for the urban farmland right down here next to Beersheba Park. And that's a very place is very active for select for the Ethiopian communities and some of the other communities in Rainier Beach in Southeast Seattle. Let me think. So those are the connections that are a constant in the volunteer work that I do. Again, I'm very interested in being a conduit for community input. Oh, and I also think the one group that people have brought up online is also commuters, because if you go, south of the 3 mile stretch, just like Skyway and then unincorporated King County, that is a major commuting route to the north end for a lot of people south of us.
Perfect. Thank you, Patricia. Joey, you are next on my screen.
Let's see. Yeah, so certainly Seattle Parks and Recreation, Seattle Housing Authority, Catholic Community Services. I know for me, I write a newsletter every week for Stewart Park Audubon Center. We reach 10,000 people. I'm happy to include that in there. I can also focus it so it hits particular zip codes and not all the zip codes that we serve, because some of those are in New York and Michigan and such. But also, I know that there's still going to be a lot of organizations that represent different ethnic communities. So, we need to kind of look along, maybe connecting with, what is it? Oh shit, I can't remember the name of it. But there is a person who ran the Columbia City Business Association, who had a lot of connections. That organization.
Susan?
Yes, Susan. I'm going to see Susan pretty soon, and maybe I can work with her to find some more connections to different communities, although that organization is no longer operating.
Thank you. Next I see Zachary on my screen.
So in terms of additional input from other organizations, I have got contacted by a woman who lives on the boulevard, and her only access to and from her home is by using Lake Washington Boulevard. And she has sort of reached out to make sure that we at least have that on our radar, that there are people that really directly get impacted in terms of hard to get in and out. She's 86 years old. I told her that I would certainly offer to be a conduit of information to her. And if she wanted to at some point address the the task force, that if that was appropriate, that could happen. She thinks there are 42 people or 42 homes along the boulevard. These would all be in the Lakewood Seward Park area. Mount Baker doesn't have any homes along the water there. Mainly, I deal with Mount Baker Community Club and the people that will be impacted by this. Other organizations, there are, I was going to say the Columbia City Business Association. I didn't know it wasn't active. There's also something called like the Mount Baker Hub, and it's essentially business owners and residents that live in and around the Mount Baker light rail station and transit center, and they have some sort of organization that's up and running. But I did want to say that as we speak in terms of social equity and other things, folk got to get to work. People drive to work, and cutting off one of the main ways to get to work has an absolute disparate impact on people trying to make a living. And a lot of what's being suggested in some ways has the opposite effect. It makes it nicer for those homeowners that you've listed that have the luxury of living down there, and making it more serene and more park-like. It may not be an organization, but more something I'd like to highlight, that with as hot as it's getting in Seattle, for fun, folks should go down and see what happens at Mount Baker Beach when it's 96 degrees, 94 degrees, 92 degrees, and it's lovely how many people are using it. What's not lovely is there's serious access problems towards Stan Sayers pits. People had essentially parallel parked in between the trees, meaning you got the road, you got sort of a median, and then you got the walking path. And I thought that was great. It didn't hurt anybody. It didn't run over flowers. It didn't do anything. And it gave maybe another 75 cars access to cooling. And cooling is going to become more and more of a public safety, public health issue. But currently, there isn't much access from transit and otherwise to the beach and to that wonderful park. And boy, would it be nice to have something happening that gives, particularly during these heat waves, the ability to get a lot more people down there. And that's all I got.
Thanks, Zachary. And then I see you on next on my screen.
Obviously, as I said at their first meeting, I'm a member of ABC, which is a cycling club for that represents Asian folks and Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian folks. So I've been trying to get them information, but I think Ty mentioned ACRS. I feel like y'all, the city that is already have direct lines, but I also know the policy analyst there. That being said, the Asian community is really, I guess, diverse. There are a lot of Asian communities that I don't have access to, but I can see aren't represented here. So personally, I'm actually not entirely sure on how to reach out to all of them. I know Ty mentioned the Filipino community, but there's also a very vast Viet community that's around here. I think that there are a lot of businesses that have been gentrified out, unfortunately. But there is a strip of businesses along 50th that I think should be reached out to. And I think that even though the Columbia City Business Association is apparently no longer business, I think it's really important to reach out to the businesses there. That's all I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure we'll come up with more as we keep going.
Perfect. Patricia, I see your hand is up, and then we'll kick it to Edwin as our last person.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can wait.
Wait, sorry. I wanted to add one more. No, we haven't mentioned schools yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think reaching out to PTAs is really important.
And Joey has a good connection with the local schools.
Thank you. Great flag. Edwin, would you like to go next? And if you're talking, you're on mute. I know you also said you had to pick up kiddos, so feel free to type things in the chat as well. All right, Patricia, was there one more that you wanted to add?
There was, and it just flew right out of my head. I'm so sorry.
Okay, if it comes back to you, definitely let us know. Perfect.
Oh, it did come back in. I'm sorry. Even though it's actually the Rainier Valley Chamber is what that Columbia Business Association was called, I think. But anyway, the Rainier Valley Chamber still has, at least the people who were active in it, still have something called South End Connect. They still have a social media place to reach the business community. So I'll get you the exact name of the what am I trying to say, of that group.
Yeah. And if I could chime in, so there still is a Columbia City Business Association. They just don't have funding for a executive director. So they're still a membership organization.
You mean Rainier Valley Chamber? Is that what you're referring?
I'm talking about Columbia City Business, because there was two of them.
Okay, well, Susan Davis was with Columbia, with Rainier Valley,
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they still have an active social media program platform.
Wonderful. Perfect. Okay, this is a pretty extensive list. And again, we can continue to add to it. But this will definitely be a good, it's going to be a good way to get us started. I'm going to, Adonis, if it's okay with you, put up on the screen the outreach budget and the updated timeline so that we can go through that. And then I think we'll get close to actually closing out today. So let me get that on the screen.
We have South Seattle Emerald as well, yes. So I think what we want to do is, in full transparency, talk about the budget. So we have 200,000. I think that's a rounding from our subtotal to our total. That's, we round up to 200,000. So of that, to implement what we're doing, there is staff labor, our consultant. For the task members, we are hoping to compensate, and just give a plug for W-9s. We need to get those back from folks if you haven't done them. And so where that leaves us with is we've got about 44,000 to do.
Wow.
Go out and do the work, to do the work. And it might seem like a small number, but 44,000 can go a long way. Or it can't go a long way. You can do one big event for 40,000, or we can do multiple smaller events for 44. We'll just say 45 to make it easier. Send the W-9s to me so I can get them to Belen. And so if we were talking translation, ethnic media, we can do A-boards. These are just examples. These are examples of things that can be done. In-person outreach events. My time, I'm on the team, so me going out and helping y'all. And then also y'all going out and doing the outreach as well, asking the questions, doing the surveys. So I just wanted to put this out there that we've got about $45,000 to go out there and be out there in the community doing this work. And just to give you some, I've done a lot of mailers. Mailers are expensive, believe it or not. I'm not discouraging us from doing one, but I just don't want anyone to have sticker shock if they say we need to mail everyone south of I-90 to Renton. Those can run anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 just to do a mailer, which is crazy if you ask me. So just keep that in mind as well. So the more of our time, we can figure out what we want to do, and then we have a budget to work within to see what we can do. Obviously, the more that you all do to help do a lot of this is helpful as well. And then plus you have my time to go out and do stuff too. So I don't know if there's any questions about this. It's in the PowerPoint, you have it. But we want to be very transparent about what this budget is and what it means. Go ahead, Patricia.
Oh, how much of your time do we have?
For
the, I mean, is it, you mean a lump sum for the project, or is it by the week, or how does it work?
Well, so if I have it up right here too as well. So every hour that the way it works at SDOT is, you know, we have to bill our time, especially for me who does like capital projects and stuff. I have to build my time to some particular thing. So I don't know if I had, you know, if it's 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours, but if it's like, hey, Adonis, we need you and your team to go do this thing, and we're getting some interns as well. And interns can bill other places to go out and do things. So I can't give you like a specific 10, 20, depends on what the task is, but I will have to bill my time to this project, but that can be billed as outreach versus just my staff time. I don't know if that makes sense, but if I go out and do an event for 10 hours, I would bill that time to this project, and that comes out of the budget. If I go out and do 20 hours worth of work.
I just don't have a sense of,
how much.
I mean,
Yeah,
if you got 10 or 20, you're saying you have 10 or 20 hours a week to devote to it, or over the whole,
it could be
like,
over the whole, yeah. The
10 or
whole
20
thing.
hours of your time
It could be. It could be. I
over the
can't give
whole
you a
6 months?
it could be that, but I would have to do the math. I just can't give you a specific number. It depends on what we decide to do, or what you all decide to do, how much I can help with what we all decide to do. But I can't say that's going to be 20 hours, 30, 40. Because you got to imagine an outreach event is only going to be 2 hours, right? So I could do 2 hours of work over the course of several weeks. So, Yuan, that's yeah, that's my struggle doing outreach for the last 10 plus years, is who was reached and who wasn't reached. And we do all the things that we can to reach people. It's just one of those things that, you know, and I hate to say this, but you know, we're all sort of on the same team. Typically when folks say that they weren't reached, what I've heard is when folks don't get what they want. They say, you didn't talk to me. That's what I've heard. So when people say they haven't been reached, it's usually because something did not occur. And then there's other folks who genuinely aren't reached because we have a boundary. We have a boundary. So going back to the mailer, like I said, we could do a mailer of all of South Seattle of what we would consider, some people would consider South Seattle. But again, we get into this idea of the cost of doing that and working within a budget. And so we have to draw a boundary at some point, at some place around, is it Lake Washington Boulevard? Is it 2 miles to the west of Lake Washington Boulevard because we can't go east? And then how far to the north and how far to the south that we go? And then the folks on the outside of that boundary will definitely say, I didn't get a mailer. But at some point we have to define what that is. And so we have these other avenues of events, of the community organizations we all talked about, through churches, synagogues in there, the work that you all are doing on your own to reach as many people as we can, given the impact of what could be Lake Washington Boulevard. But be prepared for people to say, I didn't hear about this, or I didn't know about this. We would like to avoid that, but just be prepared for that. In my experience of doing this, it happens. And I think we will get into some of the tactics for what we want to do here. Like what specifically do we want to do?
Jennifer, I see your hand is up.
Would it come out of the budget if, say, the SDOT outreach team that does the social media, did we have to count their time as kind of against that budget if they help us get the word out? Or is that we can send them information, or I should say you can send them information and that would amplify those outreach efforts?
So if we did if we all decided a survey was the best way to go, and we want, well, one of the tools we wanted to use was a survey, we can definitely have our communications team, our social media team do blog posts, which is also a news release, and their time comes out of overhead. So that does not come out of this project. So we can definitely lean on that as a resource.
Great. If there are no more questions about the budget, oh, I see your hand is up, Terry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, we've just gotten a long list of people to reach out to do outreach with, and then let's say you give another week and ask the other people who weren't here if they can add to the list. Could staff assemble essentially a mailing in whatever form, email or whatever, to essentially announce the envisioning events to all of those groups? I'm just sort of asking structurally, is that a reasonable request for staff to set something like that up?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, we could mail the different groups, we can email them. We can try to be as creative as possible. I mean, one option is to have different other representatives from those groups come to this meeting, and have as many of them on one of our calls, right? Bring them all together so we're not talking to them individually. So we're being a little bit more efficient there with their time. But yeah, we can email, mail, we can get the information to contact the different groups if you already don't have it. So the more information you can give us on how to contact people, we can take that on and do that ourselves too. Yeah.
Hey, sorry, this is Edwin. I was with the babies and things got a little hectic, but I heard folks were talking about different orgs we should reach out to.
Yes, if there's anyone that you want to add
Is that
to,
right?
yeah. If there are people that you have connections and relationships to, and you believe we should be reaching out to them about this, we would love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, there's, again, folks from North Star, I think, that have direct conversations with, or they would be part of another group, or that's very easy. Another thing that I'm considering is how we leverage that this is a city funded and kind of activated endeavor, and perhaps even get like advertising on buses and on places that usually our communities wouldn't get advertising for this type of organizing work.
So typically when we do, so ads on buses, you do have to pay for. That's not incredibly expensive to do that kind of thing. So if there's a survey, QR code, or a place we want people to go, we can definitely help coordinate that. But it would come out of the budget to do something like that. What I'm trying to think of other tools similar to that SDOT is already involved in. What we can do is it gets tricky a little bit, Edwin, because we could ask Metro, King County Metro or King County or other groups to help amplify the message through their own blogs and through their own things. Like Parks would be on board with this. Parks would just do it, right? They'll amplify it anyways because we're all working together. But if we were to ask King County Metro to help amplify it, which they would through like social media and various things, but if like we were like, oh, send this to your listserv, because when people sign up for specific listservs, they're only signing up for that particular project. So it gets a little tricky there, but we can ask them to definitely amplify the message through their social media and various blogs that they do. But it just gets a little tricky when we ask them to share something in a listserv related to a project that's not related to this one. Yep. Sorry, I'm like responding to things in the chat.
I was gonna say, I'm capturing the questions that I'm seeing from you, Johan, in the chat, because these are going to be great things for our next meeting. So definitely keep them coming. I'm capturing them. I'm putting them in another document so that we can have that prepared.
And I do want to, real quick, Jackie, just address Ty's question as well. So in terms of outreach, the only real outreach that we've got planned at the moment is just informing. I've got the little fact sheet that says we're all meeting in Lake Washington Boulevard. We're thinking about it. I think you all have seen it. If you haven't, I can share it. It doesn't have a whole lot of information in it, but I was planning to be at Othello Fest. And then I got a small group here, and Columbia City's Farmers Market. So SDOT will have a table with multiple projects at these events, and I'm gonna go for an hour or two and just say we got this Lake Washington Boulevard thing going on. If there is something that we want to have prepared, I don't know if Umoja Fest, potentially at the Columbia City Farmers Market. I don't know if we'll be able to pull something together for Othello Fest or Umoja Fest in terms of a survey and what those questions are. I don't know if we'll have time to do that. But Columbia City Farmers Market goes to.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah.
Patricia, your hand is up.
So I sent in a question to Adonis during this last couple of weeks. One of the community members asked if, oh, actually the link for the audio recording isn't up yet. The last blog thing on the SDOT site is from May 9th. So I'm wondering when that might get updated.
The video should be uploaded to our YouTube. Let me go find it.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be on the blog, but so one community member asked if there was a way for community members to listen live to these meetings instead of later looking for the recording. And I think there was another comment from another member who's maybe not here that might be controversial.
Well, I don't want to speak for Jackie's team because they're the ones who are the owner of this meeting, but I don't think it's a technical challenge to do that because you can have people observe. They can't participate, but they can observe. But it's more of a question for the group. Is that something you all are interested in?
Okay, Jennifer said I would vote to not have the public in the meeting. I think it would strife the conversation a bit. I feel like, Patricia, what you're asking is if there's a way to kind of live stream the meeting so people could watch it in real time. I don't know if they would, there's ways to do it where they wouldn't actually be on the Zoom, but we could live stream it to a platform.
Yeah, in my eyes, if we're going to be recording it and putting it on the YouTube site anyways, if folks want to watch the live stream, I don't actually see the difference because they wouldn't be in the Zoom meeting. They would have to be watching it on YouTube.
Yeah, I believe when we talked as consultants and staff that there's just a little bit of a technical difficulties around being able to monitor it and making sure that it's streaming correctly, but then also kind of what Edwin said as well, is that I think sometimes people, when they are watching those things on live stream, they want to be able to comment and interact, and there wouldn't be a way for folks to do that if we were live streaming. So that's kind of how we had the initial idea of just recording it and putting it somewhere on YouTube for people to view later.
So yeah, I'll let people know that they'll need to that they will be able to access it. I don't know when after because it's not up yet. So I don't know how long it takes to get up, but when was our last meeting? It was about.
Yeah, I put the link in the chat, Patricia.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah.
So Patricia, it sounds like it's up on YouTube. It's just they don't put it on the blog.
Yeah, I've watched it on YouTube. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, this was not my personal idea, although I liked the idea. I thought that was kind of engaging, but no, this was just somebody from the community that asked if they would be able to watch it live.
So real quick on the SDOT blog, I had talked to our media folks about doing a blog after our first meeting. And to be completely frank, we didn't have any action items for the community after that. So there wasn't, other than us meeting, there was really no news other than we met, right? So we decided not to do a blog on the last meeting, if that makes sense, because it is also a news, it's also like one of our media advisories. And so what we had decided was on the communications front, when we have some actions or something, a milestone that we reach, we would like to do a blog post about what we're doing. So if we're launching a survey, or if we're launching, we're going to do this thing on this date, and we're going to be there and we want people to be involved, we do a blog post there. But we can and will share this through the listserv of all the people who have signed up for Lake Washington Boulevard updates, but not the blog.
So So these recordings won't be on the blog in future either after all, because I just want to clarify that.
No, to clarify,
Yeah.
our blogs are news releases and we don't do blogs all the time. So
Okay, how about this meeting, like, for example, would this be?
probably
one
won't
or-
do, yeah, probably won't do a news release on this particular meeting.
I see,
Right?
okay.
Like we did a lot of work. We worked, but we don't have any action for the public, if that makes sense, for them
Well,
to.
it does, and I didn't know that was the policy, but I can tell you, people are very interested, and I think they would be very happy to be able to access it. So that's just the feedback I'm getting.
But yeah, what I am saying though is that in our listserv, we've got about 5,000 people signed up for the Lake Washington Boulevard listserv.
Good.
I will share the link through
Great.
there. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And I know we're doing.
So Adonis, to get on that listserv, if people aren't on it, do they write you?
I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah, they can write me or they can go to the website, sign up through there too.
Okay.
I'll put those
Yeah,
in the chat.
I'm trying to, I'm sorry, I don't want to get distracted to try to find it in the chat. Could we have the
We
various?
can send this out in
link
the follow-up
out
email.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We could send this out in the follow-up email, how to direct
Great.
people to watch the recordings and how to sign up for the listserv.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Zachary, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. And I guess this might be, we're working towards deciding these sorts of things, but at some point I'll be wanting to report back to my organization. And I certainly don't want to do it in a way that's inconsistent with how this task force is coming about. And it sure would be nice if there was something like a blog post that I could just forward where they could have access to the information. But I imagine part of our outreach will be, and this is probably at the next meeting, how do we update our constituencies with what's going on? And we as a task force should probably understand whether or not that's an appropriate dissemination of information, or is that premature because we're still working on things?
I would say, feel free to share anything you all talk about with your various groups. From the last meeting, this meeting, definitely. That's why, we met, we came up with some goals, share what you will, right, about where we're at. I think once we have actions for the community, we want them to take a survey. There's a thing we want them to be at. We're ready to have our outreach and engagement kick off. That is something that we would do a blog for that you could share with a bunch of people, right? Because we're going to amplify it through social media, ask our partners to amplify it, because we want to get as much engagement as possible. So yes, we could do that as well. And tie the Stay Healthy Streets at seattle.gov. We couldn't move that listserv over to a new email address, and that email address was the one that was out there. So that is the email address, yeah. Even though this is no longer associated with Keep Moving Streets or Stay Healthy Streets. This is its own thing.
Right.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to put up what the next steps are, as it is getting close to the end of our time. So let me flash my screen up again for y'all. Okay. So again, just another plug for the W-9s. Want to make sure that you all can receive the stipends that go along with being a part of this task force. We're going to follow up with folks after our next meeting around if we should form subcommittees to kind of map out the two major tracks of this work: the actual doing the outreach, and then the report that's going to be what culminates this work. We wanted to propose to the group to have 2 August meetings, particularly to kind of flesh out and solidify what the outreach plan is and the tactics that we'll be using to do the outreach, whether that's a survey, whether that's a presentation, or a combination of those different tactics. But I think the goal is to be able to present to you all a few different options of what outreach could look like and what we would be outreaching on based off of today's conversations. What we were able to put on the calendar for our standing meetings is for the 4th Monday of the month, to be able to have a meeting in the evening. We were hoping to be able to add a second meeting in the month of August, which would be in mid-August, either the 8th or the 15th. And wanted to kind of see people's initial options. Go ahead, Adonis.
And we want to do 2 meetings because just looking at our timeline, we need to get out there and start talking to people as soon as we can. But that also means we have to sort of have a couple more meetings. So we need to figure out like exactly what it is we want to be doing, who we want to be talking to, and then go out there and implement these things, start doing these things in the month of September, October, to turn around and give us time to pull the report together, pull those high level things together, right, for December, January, February timeframe. And if we did a second meeting in August, is evening better for folks? That's what I figured.
I'm seeing a couple of people saying the 15th, and I think we would just keep it at that time that we have for our 4th Mondays of the month, which I believe, Adonis or Belen, could you remind me of the time for that 4th Monday of the month?
4 to 6 p.m.
Great, so we could just keep that time. If we did it on, it's looking like hopefully the 15th, and perhaps we could even make it just an hour as well. Just be respectful of folks' time. All right, perfect. So it looks like if we can send something out on the 15th, to everyone, and we'll get that solidified for folks. And again, appreciate this. We're hoping for the remainder of our time that the meetings can be once a month, just to be respectful of people's capacity. Okay, perfect. And then next, Adonis has mentioned that he'll be at a few events in the upcoming weeks. And now that we kind of have what our long-term goals are, these would be great things for Adonis to be able to share with folks at the outreach events. It looks like there will be one in Columbia City's Farmer Market, Othello Fest, and Emoja Fest. And if folks are interested in being there with Adonis, I believe there is that opportunity as well.
Yeah, if you come down and say hi, hang out. I'll let you know. I'll send out the times that I'll be there. I'm not really planning to be there like the whole event. I'll be there for an hour or two. Because like I said, it's going to be like an S-stop table with multiple projects at it. And ours is just one of them.
All right. Well,
I just volunteer. Sorry. So Adonis, I'll be there the whole time because Detective Cookie, we have a
yeah.
So I can definitely come over and schmooze and spell you if you want.
We'll all be down there in some way. I mean, we'll all see each other, I'm sure, somewhere out there. But yes, we'll be there. Yeah, Emoji Fest would be great, Ty. That'd be cool.
Oh no, I'm sorry, that was Othello Fest.
Oh yeah, no,
yes.
I was talking to you and responding to Ty's chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. I know myself and my little one will be at Emoji Fest as well.
So
Okay.
going to our next meeting, if we do have a shorter meeting, I want to see how much we can get done over email. So what I may do is if this is okay, pull together some of the outreach tactics that we typically use at SDOT. Those are surveys, briefings, et cetera, et cetera. And then so that way we can get that stuff out of the way. And if there's anything that's missing from that list, or you're like, that typically traditionally doesn't work, let's consider something else. We can, just to help with the time. And Zach, your hand is up. Has it been up, or is that an old hand?
It was from before. Do I have to lower my hand? There we go.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Thank you.
So we'll try to get as much done between now and the 15th via here, some of the goals that we discussed. There's things that we need to change. Yeah, they want to add that kind of thing.
And thank you everyone so much for your contributions today. This has been super helpful. I appreciate all the different perspectives and what everyone is able to bring. I think the development of these goals is really going to support us for the rest of our work, and also just appreciate everyone modeling when you need more clarification, when you want to push back on things. I think everyone has really shown up in a great way and has really added to this conversation in so many different ways. So I'm looking forward to the next time that we are able to meet. And of course, in the meantime, you have Adonis and Belen's information if you have questions or wanted to ping anything else. But if that is everything, thank you so much for sticking through this longer meeting, and hope to see you all soon out at these different events.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.